Welcome back to the channel and thank you for watching. I am a barrister of England and Wales who helps you understand law. So Elaine Brederhoft may be in serious trouble, and this is why.
At the end of the day, she's made $1 million in payments to them, but then she got sued here and hasn't been able to because she spent $6 million in attorney's fees. That is unrefuted. She still intends to pay those pledges, honor those.
So those of you with a vested interest in this case, for whatever your personal reasons might be, who have doubtless watched many videos like this one by creators such as myself, will doubtless remember Elaine's closing arguments to the jury, within which one of the main arguments that Amber could not pay over, not just pledge, but pay over these donation monies, was because she was being sued and had to pay $6 million in legal fees, as Elaine just quoted in that short clip. However, if that's not true, i.e. if Amber did not actually pay those fees, then that could spell serious trouble for Elaine Brederhoft. And today I was alerted, or I came to find a great channel by another great lawyer, Andrea Burkhardt, whose channel I will link in the description below, with the video that brought this more closely to my attention, because talking about these issues, and as I said, I would talk in more detail about these issues, because there seems to be an underlying litigation between two insurance companies that sought to give Amber Heard some discretion by not mentioning her name. But don't worry, I'll explain how these relate in just a moment. But in this lawsuit, it specifically says that one of them has incurred in excess of $5 million in fees, as at the time of filing their answer to a counterclaim. As I said, I'm going to explain this in just a moment. But if that being the case, if one of these insurance companies have paid those funds and it's not Amber that's paid those funds, then Elaine has essentially misled the jury. She's essentially repeated something that Amber has said in her testimony, which is ultimately a matter for her. But if Elaine has repeated this to the jury being part of the court, remember, then that being the case, in my view, she would have misled the court, which is a serious issue, usually and very typically leading to disbarment. So allow me to just explain briefly how these two insurance companies come into play and why this seems to have come to light. And don't forget, I will also link Andrea's video in the description below, which you can go and watch afterwards. So it seems to be the case from these filings that two insurance companies were providing policies to Amber Heard, both of which covered some form of defamation. Those two companies appear to be Travelers Commercial Insurance Company in Connecticut and New York Marine and General Insurance Company in Delaware. So they both provided policies to Amber Heard, and both policies seem to cover her for at least some amount of defamation claims. Now, the underlying litigation seems to come out of the fact that these policies gave rise to a duty to defend. That means if you have an insurance policy that covers a certain event, as we discussed in my previous insurance video, then the policy is activated by the event, and the insurance company has a duty to then stand in and provide representation to you. There are also some very interesting discussions toing and froing about legal representatives, but I will leave that to Andrew's video, which you can watch afterwards. But suffice to say, this underlying litigation, and by underlying I mean this litigation was going on in the background to the main Depp Heard trial. But you didn't need to hear about it listening to the main case, and the jury didn't need to hear about it listening to the main case. It was underlying, it was in the background, it was arguments over fees, arguments over hourly rates, which is one of the interesting things to talk about. But ultimately, in this particular filing, it confirms on the face of it on page 4 that Travelers incurred in excess of $5 million defending the insured, which appears to be Amber Heard, in the underlying litigation. Now, as to why there might be litigation between these two companies aside from the main case, is that if you remember, both of these companies would have had a duty to defend arising from the policy, and so the argument was essentially about who was to provide representation and who was to pay for that representation. And in this case, one of the representatives withdrew and ultimately was replaced by Elaine Brederhoft. But coming back to the main point of this video, if all of this is true and the insurance companies have in fact paid these funds and not Amber Heard, and she has not paid these funds, then that is not a reason why she couldn't pay the donation monies and therefore was misleading. Now, it's one thing for Amber to say something that's misleading. It may or may not go anywhere at all. It may or may not amount to perjury if she's lying in court, and there may or may not be any follow-up if she's found to have been misleading the court in that way in her testimony. However, it's an entirely other thing for a lawyer to be misleading the court, particularly the jury in a closing speech, making a statement which ultimately, if all of this bears out to be true, the statement is not true and it's misled the jury. In fact, Andrea makes another good point in her video, because it seems to be that Camille Vasquez was surprised by this statement by Elaine Brederhoft. Watch the clip again and let me know in the comments what you think.
At the end of the day, she's made $1 million in payments to them, but then she got sued here and hasn't been able to because she spent $6 million in attorney's fees. That is unrefuted. She still intends to pay those pledges.
Does this look like Camille Vasquez heard this statement by Elaine and was shocked and surprised by it? And if so, who did she look at? Was it Ben Chu or the judge? I don't know if there's another camera angle which I'm going to look for in a minute, which catches who she might be looking at. It could be Benjamin Chu, or she could be looking at the judge as if to say, she can't say that, Elaine can't say that. But it's not customary to interrupt a closing speech. Lawyers generally don't do it. It is possible for a lawyer to object, to say that wasn't raised in evidence or that's contradicting evidence. But most lawyers don't do that. It's sort of a golden rule to not interrupt a closing speech. And if there is a problem, it should ultimately be raised later. But let me know in the comments what you think. Watch the clip again.
At the end of the day, she's made $1 million in payments to them, but then she got sued here and hasn't been able to because she spent $6 million in attorney's fees. That is unrefuted. She still intends to pay those pledges.
So as I said, let me know in the comments. Do you think that was a look of shock and surprise on Camille Vasquez, or was she just looking at something else? Am I just clutching at straws? But it does seem to me like she was surprised by Elaine making this statement to the jury, because it seems that lots of people didn't actually believe that that was true, and in that case Elaine's statement would be at the very least misleading. So doubtless there's going to be more research into this issue, and we'll probably find out whether this really is the case, whether this really was the insurance companies confirming that they've paid all these fees and not Amber Heard. So aside from that, lots of people have asked generally how these insurance policies work. I mentioned in the previous video that insurance covers an event, so there must be an insurable event, and I use the example of a garden wall. If your garden wall just falls down, that itself is not an event. It might fall down for wear and tear, it might fall down because it's old, but if it falls down because of an earthquake, because of flooding, because of storms, because of criminal damage, or even accidental damage, there's an event that it can be tied to, and it will activate the insurance policy. It isn't good enough to simply have it fall down with no event. Now, when it comes to defamation, most insurance companies actually don't cover defamation, but one or two of them do, and they're usually quite expensive. There are other types of insurance, such as before the event insurance and after the event insurance. And before the event insurance, specifically for defamation, is not normally possible, because it wouldn't be good enough, certainly for the insurance company's point of view, to raise an insurance policy, then go and make a defamatory statement, and then expect your insurance company to pick up the bill when you get sued for defamation. But speaking of picking up the bill and how it works generally, many of you have asked how this works generally. So I'm a lawyer, and I've been involved in many cases where there's been an insurance policy involved, and here is how it works. Very often the insurance policy is just going to pay the lawyers directly, and the insured, which is the person who owns the policy, who is being insured for that event that has happened will not normally have to pay out for their lawyer. Sometimes they will have to pay for an initial opinion, which is then reimbursed by the insurance company if there is such a claim. So let me walk you through how that might work. So let's say you've got a home insurance policy which will cover you for, say, consumer claims. So if you buy a car and it goes wrong and you want your home insurance policy to pick up the bill for suing the company that sold you the car because the car's gone wrong, here's how that might work in practice. You buy a car, it goes wrong, you want to sue them. You go to the insurance company, they say, well, we will cover you if you get an opinion from some lawyer that says there is a claim there. This is one example of how it sometimes works. The insured, the person owning the policy who bought the car, will then go to a lawyer and say, I've bought this car, can you provide me a written opinion as to the merits of suing the company that sold me the car because I have an insurance policy? Lawyer says, yes, no problem. Here's a fixed fee or an hourly rate or however they charge to provide that opinion. I normally do those on a fixed fee just because it's easier for everybody involved and everybody knows what they're paying up front, but that's the way I like to work. Then we provide the advice. If the advice is in the negative and say, actually, no, the company's right, you are wrong, obviously the insurance company is then not going to pick up the bill and run through and file a claim. The individual would be at liberty to file a claim, but they'd probably not be advised to. They've literally been advised that the merits are not in the claim. But let's say the advice is positive, there is a claim there, and the person should be able to succeed in a claim against the company that sold them the car. They will then go back to the insurance company and say, here's my advice from the lawyer. The insurance company says, great, there's merits in the claim. We will cover your claim, we'll reimburse your cost of obtaining the opinion in the first place, the opinion on the merits of running the claim, and we'll provide you a cap of X. X is a figure usually beyond which the insurance company is not going to pay any more in the legal fees or entirety of the claim, depending on how it's worded. Very typically in England and Wales, that cap will be £100,000. That might sound like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money to most people. However, when you come to the legal world and paying legal fees, that can disappear very, very quickly. Not just because lawyers charge hourly rates, which are usually quite expensive, but because it's normally very long and protracted. There's a lot of correspondence, there's a lot of expert reports, there's a lot of litigation going on, which is applications to the court and correspondence and so on. So those funds can get depleted very quickly. When you get up to or beyond that cap, the insurance company will normally not pay out any more, and you will usually have to get approval from the insurance company to carry on the claim to cover you beyond that initial cap limit. There are also all sorts of other complications, such as filing cost budgets at court, which tells the court how much you expect it to cost, which will then ultimately depend how much you can recover from the other side in the event that your case is successful. Either way, the important point to note here is the insured person is not, if the claim is being run and insured, not ordinarily paying out of their own pocket. So why am I telling you all this? Well, because this is the ordinary way of running things. If the insurance company is picking up the bill, ordinarily the person, the insured, the policyholder is not paying out of their own pocket. Bringing this back on point, if these insurance companies have either one or both contributed or shared or split up, somehow argued, as the case seems to be, over the costs for the attorneys running this case for Amber Heard, then it follows that Amber Heard has not paid out of her own pocket for those fees. Then it follows that if she said on the stand that the reason she didn't pay the donation monies was because she'd been sued, and I recall her saying she hasn't been able to fulfill those obligations because she's been sued here, then it follows that that is misleading. If that is all the case, then it follows that Elaine's statement to the jury was also misleading. Because if all that being the case, Elaine would know that that's not true, because Elaine would know that she's been paid by the insurance company. Because again, if all this is true behind the scenes, which it appears to be from these filings, then she would know that it's not true. Then she would also know that it's misleading the jury. And that is why, as I said at the outset of this video, that I think she might have a very serious problem here. But as I say, there's another interesting discussion on this, which I'm not stealing all the good points from, because that's not fair. That is Andrea's video, linked in the description below. Please go and watch it. And if you would like to see Andrea join me on this channel, perhaps with Al Robert Shaw Esquire, on a live stream probably next week, because you probably gathered that I'm on holiday at the moment and still creating videos for you. However, if you'd like to see her on a live stream, do let me know in the comments. Do like the video and share it. Go over it and subscribe to Andrea as well. Hit the bell icon so that YouTube knows that you like to watch this content. And I very much look forward to having Andrea on this channel next week with Mr. Robert Shaw, and I look forward to seeing you all there on the live next week to discuss both this and other things in much more detail. So thank you for your attention. Please do like the video and subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.